Welcome back. It's 11 p.m. So I think that's the last one for today. But that's what I did like to read about the Pentium processors, because I have started to buy this old gamer computers. This is an old Acer Aspire, old Pentium there. But I think it's a Pentium D. It's a Pentium dual core. But we are getting there maybe tomorrow. So, but I read Pentium 1 and Pentium Pro, Pentium 2, 3, 4, 5M, multi-core Pentium D. But it's 11 p.m. So I think let's do this is the last one. Let's I can watch some Netflix. But this is why the Pentium 2 you can buy secondhand as a retro gamer computer. But this can run like Windows 98 and even Windows 2000, the Windows ME I think. Could even maybe run Windows XP. Maybe. I have to look that later. Even this one can run Windows XP. Yes, but I was 30 years when in 1997 I was 31 years old. I'm born in year 1966. So I was already adult back then.
Pentium 2. Pentium II Pentium 2 Original Case Batch.png. Original Pentium 2 MMX Case Batch General Information launched May 7, 1997. Discontinued December 26, 2003. 1. Common Manufacturer, S. Intel. Performance Max. CPU clock rate 233 MHz to 450 MHz. Speed 66 MHz to 100 ms. Architecture and classification technology Node 0.35M to 0.18 Instruction set IA32 extensions MMX, PAE. Physical specifications Cores 1. Socket, S, Slot 1. MMC 1. MMC 2. The Pentium 2 brand refers to Intel's 6th generation microarchitecture, P6, and x86 compatible microprocessors introduced on the 7th of May, 1997. Containing 7.5 million transistors, 27.4 million in the case of the Mobile Dixon with 256 kilobytes L2 cache. The Pentium 2 featured an improved version of the first P6 generation core of the Pentium Pro, which contained 5.5 million transistors. However, its L2 cache subsystem was a downgrade to N compared to the Pentium Pros, and it is a single-core microprocessor. In 1998, Intel stratified the Pentium 2 family by releasing the Pentium 2-based Celeron line of processors for low-end workstations and the Pentium 2 Xeon line for servers and high-end workstations. The Celeron was characterized by a reduced aromatid, in some cases present but disabled, on-die full-speed L2 cache and a 66 mount /SFSB. The Xeon was characterized by a range of full-speed L2 cache, from 512 kilobytes to 2048 kilobytes, a 100 mount /SFSB, a different physical interface, slot 2, and support for symmetric multiprocessing. In February 1999, the Pentium 2 was replaced by the near-identical Pentium 3, which only added the then new SSE instruction set. However, The older family would continue to be produced until June 2001 for desktop units, 3 September 2001 for mobile units, 4, and the end of 2003 for embedded devices. 1. Contents. Overview. Variants: Plymouth. This shoots Pentium 2 Overdrive. Tonga. Dixon. Core specifications: desktop Plymouth 80,522. This shoots 80,523. This shoots Pentium 2 Overdrive. Mobile Tonga 80,523. Mini cartridge PPGAB 615 PGA1. Products, models, variants: core name S Plymouth desktop. This shoots desktop. Tonga mobile. Dixon mobile. History: predecessor Pentium, Pentium Pro, successor Pentium 3, Celeron. Pentium 2 processor with MMX technology, SEC cartridge. Dixon 80,524. See also. References. External links. Overview. The Pentium 2 microprocessor was largely based upon the microarchitecture of its predecessor, the Pentium Pro, but with some significant improvements. 5. Unlike previous Pentium and Pentium Pro processors, the Pentium II CPU was packaged in a slot-based module rather than a CPU circuit. The processor and associated components were carried on a daughterboard similar to a typical expansion board within a plastic cartridge. A fixed or removable heatsink was carried on one side, sometimes using its own fan. 6. This larger package was a compromise, allowing Intel to separate the secondary cache from the processor while still keeping it on a closely coupled backside bus. The L2 cache ran at half the processor's clock frequency, unlike the Pentium Pro, whose off-die L2 cache ran at the same frequency as the processor. However, its associativity was increased to 16-way, compared to 4-way on the Pentium Pro, and its size was always 512 kilobytes, twice of the smallest option of 256 KB on the Pentium Pro. Off-package cache solved the Pentium Pro's low-yield issues, allowing Intel to introduce the Pentium 2 at a mainstream price level. 7. 8. Intel improved 16-bit code execution performance on the Pentium 2, an area in which the Pentium Pro weighs at a notable handicap, by adding segment register caches. Most consumer software of the day was still using at least some 16-bit code, because of a variety of factors. The issues with partial registers was also addressed by adding an internal flag to skip pipeline flushes whenever possible. 9. To compensate for this lower L2 cache, the Pentium 2 featured 32 kilobytes of L1 cache, double that of the Pentium Pro, as well as 4 write buffers, versus 2 on the Pentium Pro. These can also be used by either pipeline, instead of each one being fixed to one pipeline. 10. 11. The Pentium 2 was also the first P6-based CPU to implement the Intel MM's integer SIMD instruction set, which had already been introduced on the Pentium MMX. 7. The Pentium 2 was basically a more consumer-oriented version of the Pentium Pro. It was cheaper to manufacture because of the separate, slower L2 cache memory. The improved 16-bit performance and MMX support made it a better choice for consumer-level operating systems, such as Windows 9X, and multimedia applications. The slower and cheaper L2 cache's performance penalty was mitigated by the doubled L1 cache and architectural improvements for legacy code. General processor performance was increased while costs were cut. 7. 12. All Plymouth and some early disk-shoots Pentium IIS use a combined L2 cache controller /tag RAM chip that only allows for 512 megabytes to be cached, While more RAM could be installed in theory, this would result in very slow performance. While this limit was practically irrelevant for the average home user at the time, it was a concern for some workstation or server users. Presumably, Intel put this limitation deliberately in place to distinguish the Pentium 2 from the more upmarket Pentium Pro line, which has a full 4 GB cacheable area. The 82459AD revision of the chip on some 333 MHz and or 350 MHz and faster Pentium IIS lifted this restriction and also offered a full 4 GB cacheable area. 13, 14 variants. Plymouth. The original Plymouth Pentium 2 microprocessor, Intel product code 80522, ran at 233, 266, and 300 Ms and was produced in a 0.35 micrometer process. 7, 15. The 300 MHz version, however, only became available in quantities later in 1997. 15. These CPUs had a 66 MHz front-side bus and were initially used on motherboards equipped with the aging Intel 440FX Natima chipset designed for the Pentium Pro. 16. Pentium 2-based systems using the Intel 440LX Balbo chipset widely popularized SDRAM, which WASO replace EDRAM and was already introduced with 430VX, and the AGP graphics bus. 17. On the 14th of July 1997, Intel announced a version of the Pentium 2 Plymouth with 272-bit ECCL2 cache for entry-level servers, as opposed to the 264-bit non-ECCL2 cache on regular models. 18. The extra bits give it error correction capability built into hardware, without impacting performance. The variant can be determined through the CPU part number. In Intel's family /model /stepping scheme, Plymouth CPUs are family 6, model 3. Disk chutes. The disk chutes core Pentium 2, 80523, which debuted at 333 MHz in January 1998. Was produced with a 0.25 M process and has a significantly lower power draw. 15. The die size is 113 mm 2. The 333 Ms variant was the final Pentium 2 CPU that used the older 66 MHz front-side bus. All subsequent disk chute score models used a 100 MHz FSB. Later in 1998, Pentium IIS running at 266, 300, 350, 400, and 450 MHz were also released. 15. The disk chutes core introduced FSave and FSSTR instructions for fast FPU context save and restore. 19. Towards the end of its design life, disk chutes chips capable of 500 MHz within Intel cooling and design specifications were produced. However, these were not marketed. Rather than destroy already multiplier-locked units, those disk chutes units that had been tested and locked with a multiplier of 5 were sold as being 333 MHz. This was accomplished by disabling the 100 MHz bus option. Overclockers, upon learning of this, purchased the units in question and ran them well over 500 MHz, most notably, when overclocking. The final batch of 333 MHz CPUs were capable of speeds much higher than CPUs sold at 350, 400, or 450 MHz. Concurrent with the release of disk chutes cores supporting a 100 MHz front-side bus was Intel's release of 440BX Seattle chipset and its derivatives, the 440MX, 450NX, and 440ZX chipsets. Replacing the aged 66 MHz FSB, which had been on the market since 1993. The 100 MHz FSB resulted in solid performance improvements for the Pentium 2 lineup. Pentium 2 chips starting with 350 MHz were released in both SECC and SECC2 form factors. Late Pentium IIS also marked the switch to flip-chip-based packaging with direct heat sink contact to the die, as opposed to traditional bonding. While Plymouth features 4 cache chips and simulates dual porting through interleaving, 2x64-bit, for a slight performance improvement on concurrent accesses, Deschutes only sports 2 cache chips and offers slightly lower L2 cache performance at the same clock speed. Furthermore, Deschutes always features EC-enabled L2 cache. 20. Pentium 2 Xeon 450 MHz with 512 KB cache. Cartridge cover has been removed. The Pentium 2 Xeon was a high-end version of Deschutes core intended for use on workstations and servers. Principally, it used a different type of slot 2, case, board design, and more expensive full-speed custom L2 cache, which was off-die. Versions were produced with 512 kilobytes, 1 megabyte or 2 megabytes L2 caches by varying number of 512 kilobytes chips incorporated on the board. 21. Pentium 2 Overdrive without the AppSync. Deschutes core on left, cache on right in Intel's family /model/ stepping scheme. Deschutes CPUs are Family 6, Model 5 and have the part number 80523. Pentium 2 Overdrive. In 1998, the 0.25 micrometer Deschutes core was utilized in the creation of Pentium 2 Overdrive processor, which was aimed at allowing corporate Pentium Pro users to upgrade their aging servers. Combining the Deschutes core in a flip-chip package with a 512 KB full-speed L2 cache chip from the Pentium 2 Xeon into a Socket 8 compatible module resulted in a 300 or 333 EMS processor that could run on a 60 or 66 MHz front-side bus. This combination brought together some of the more attractive aspects of Pentium 2 and the Pentium 2 Xeon, MMX support /improved 16-bit performance and full-speed L2 cache, respectively. 22. Theater Dixon Mobile Pentium 2 would emulate this combination with 256 kilobytes of full-speed cache. In Intel's family /model/ stepping scheme, the Pentium 2 Overdrive CPU identifies itself as Family 6, Model 3, though this is misleading, as it is not based on the Family 6 /Model 3 Plymouth core. As mentioned in the Pentium 2 processor update documentation from Intel, although this processor has a CPUID of 163XH, it uses a Pentium 2 processor CPUID 065X processor core. 23. Tonga. The 0.25 micrometer Tonga core was the first mobile Pentium 2 and had all of the features of the desktop models. In Intel's family /model/ stepping scheme, Tonga CPUs are Family 6, Model 5. Dixon. Later, in 1999, the 0.25, 0.18, 400 MHz M. Dixon core with 256 kilobytes of on-die full-speed cache was produced for the mobile market. Reviews showed that the Dixon core was the fastest type of Pentium I produced. 15. Pentium 2 Dixon die in Intel's family /model/ stepping scheme. Dixon CPUs are Family 6, Model 6 and their Intel product code is 80524. These identifiers are shared with the Mendocino Celeron processors. Core specifications. Desktop. A Pentium 2 Plymouth backside with its plastic casing removed, showing commodity L2 cache chips and cache tag SRAM, center. A Pentium 2 Deschutes, SECC2 variant. CPU core in the middle, cache on the right. Deschutes die shot Plymouth, 80,522. L1 cache, 16 plus 16 kilobytes, Data and instructions. L2 cache, 512 kilobytes, as external chips on the CPU modular